Wildfires continue to scorch parts of California. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Well, the state's wildfire disaster is now the deadliest and most destructive in state history. At least 44 people are dead, and that number is expected to rise. President Trump is taking action, and that is where we begin tonight. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy is on the North Lawn. Good evening, Ben.
Well, Jenna, good evening. President Trump signed off on a major disaster declaration for California as crews continue to battle massive wildfires on both ends. Rescue crews have turned to recovery in some parts as flames travel too fast for people to get out safe. Canines and search crews comb through California looking for any signs of life. More than 8,000 firefighters are on the ground, but despite their best efforts, flames continue to push on.
Everybody I know lost everything. It's real sad.
Roughly 325 square miles scorched between the Camp Fire burning in Northern California and the Woolsey fire down south. Rescue personnel found the dead in or next to burned cars, overcome by smoke and flames before they could get away.
We mourn the lives of those lost and we pray for the victims. I want to thank the firefighters and FEMA and first responders for their incredible courage in the face of very grave danger.
Trump doubled down with claims that the deadly forest fires are partly due to poor forest management. I just spoke with meteorologist Joe Bastardi about Trump's threats to withdraw federal funds if forest management doesn't get their act together. Well, Joe, President Trump tweeted, with proper forest management, we can stop the devastation constantly going on in California, adding that there is no reason for these massive, deadly and costly forest fires in California, except that forest management is so poor. Billions of dollars are given each year with so many lives lost, all because of gross mismanagement of the forests. Now, Joe, is he correct? Is forest management to blame?
Well, I think, let me just say that the president has an interesting point in that a lot of us believe, for instance, you have 129 million dead trees, you should be trying to get rid of them. And there was a bipartisan bill in 2017 proposing just that, to start chopping down all this dead wood and getting it out of there. And it was vetoed by the governor of California. I don't think you can possibly eliminate all these threats. That's like trying to say you can eliminate all hurricanes. The fact of the matter is we have 42 million people living in California. That's 3 times as many as we had in the 1950s. They're living in places that are susceptible to this. They're also, sad to say, a cause of a lot of this. You know, you have a car backfire, for instance, and a spark goes off. And California is a naturally dry climate. Can we mitigate it by what the president was saying? I certainly believe so. But I also want to remind you, if you look at the increase in population and you look at the actual wildfire statistics, we have to some degree done a good job in stopping these things. They could be worse if we were just letting everything run rampant.
Now, Joe, the winds have died down a bit. What is the weather pattern over the next couple days which could actually impact the flames?
Well, it's actually going back and forth there for a while, but the good news is down the road, a week to 10 days and beyond, it looks like the jet is going to cut in across the Pacific. In other words, you have a very strong upper pattern bringing all this bitterly cold air into the United States. That's if we didn't have these wildfires, the big news is how cold the country is. Over 95% of the country has been below normal the last 5 days. It's amazing watching this. We had the earliest snow on record in Houston, Texas this morning, for instance. So the country's below normal, but that jet stream buckling, doing that, the strong jet comes down over the West Coast. That, in turn, brings the cold air, comes out of Canada on the east side of the jet. But the very strong winds come over top of California. And if it's bone dry like that, this is what's going to happen. That being said, a week to 10 days from now, this pattern looks like it's going to break. And California could actually have a wetter than normal winter.
People are still missing, disconcerting for family and friends with loved ones in the area. The White House here behind me is in touch with state and local leaders to offer federal support to help contain the blaze. Well, that's the latest from the White House. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Right, thank you, Ben. Well, up on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are back in session this week, and they have their work cut out before a new session begins in January. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has more on what is in store for them. Abigail, what are some of the things on the agenda before the new lawmakers get to town?
Well, the big thing is passing a spending bill by December 7th to avoid another partial government shutdown. Now, this could be hard because President Trump wants to see billions of dollars for his promised border wall included in these spending bills, and that's definitely going to be a fight with Democrats in the House and Senate. And the other thing lawmakers will focus on is who their new party leaders will be, with the majority changing in the House.
And with Democrats taking control of the House, Abigail, of course, a new speaker will be elected. It's looking like Nancy Pelosi. Is she kind of the shoo-in at this point?
Well, I'd say so. There are definitely people in her party that oppose her being the speaker, but so far no one else has stepped up to run against her. However, things are heating up this week on that front, and we could see some people throw their hat in the ring before the House Democrats vote on it at the end of this month.
And what will Republican leadership look like in the newly divided Congress?
Well, in the Senate, leadership will pretty much stay the same, with Mitch McConnell remaining in place as the majority leader. But in the House, we'll obviously see some changes since their current leader, Speaker Ryan, is retiring. Now, right now, it's looking like his second-in-command, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, is expected to become the new House Minority Leader, although Congressman Jim Jordan is challenging him for the position, and House Republicans will vote on that and other leadership positions tomorrow morning. But only about a quarter of the GOP conference that will start in 2019 has any experience being in the House minority, so it's definitely going to be a change for quite a few of them.
Absolutely. All right, Abigail, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon joins us now for more. Jennifer, 1 week after these midterm elections, what do you think? Was this a referendum on President Trump, or does it show unity in the Democratic Party and their ability to get together?
Well, we know one thing from the exit polls, that the majority of voters who braved the rain and went out and voted, they were motivated by the president, either voting against him or for him. However, I don't think you can look at this and say it was a referendum on the president for two reasons. One, the House losses were not as bad as they could have been, especially considering that Republicans were defending about 43 seats. So it could have been worse for Republicans in the House. It was a huge victory for Democrats, but it could have been worse. Also, Republicans gained seats in the Senate. And also, if you look at history, this was very normal, what happened. Only twice in history have we seen a new president not lose seats in the House. Once was during the Great Depression, the other was after 9/11. So really, this is kind of normal, what happens after a new president is elected.
Well, Nancy Pelosi, she came out after the election saying that Democrats had one message. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
Healthcare, healthcare, healthcare in every household in America is an important issue. But when it comes to healthcare, all politics is personal. And so, again, we made our own environment. While the GOP tried relentlessly to distract and divide, our candidates kept their focus on that subject.
Were Republicans missing that one key message, Jennifer?
Well, it's interesting how Obamacare has become more popular now that Obama is not behind it. Healthcare, transcends parties, and pre-existing conditions has always been a very popular part of Obamacare. And we did see some GOP candidates walk back their opposition to Obamacare. However, you have to remember this, Jenna. In 2016, the president and almost every Republican candidate on the ballot railed against Obamacare. They were going to repeal and replace. They couldn't make it happen. They couldn't get it done. So it was very difficult for the president to crisscross the country and draw attention to one of the key promises that he couldn't make happen.
Yeah. Jennifer, what's your sense as we head into January, Democrats getting ready to take the House? What does this divided government look like?
Well, we already have gridlock in Congress, and I think we're only going to see that get slower and more difficult if that's possible. Jenna, it's very difficult to govern. It's very, very difficult to govern. And it's much easier for members of Congress to blame the opposite party for inaction. And so I think we're going to see that. I think there will be some good faith efforts on both sides of the aisle to work together when possible, but I don't think we're going to see a lot get done. And quite frankly, I think that's the best case scenario politically for both Republicans and Democrats heading into 2020, because they can blame the other side for all the inaction in Washington.
And finally, Jennifer, today CNN filed a lawsuit against the White House for suspending Jim Acosta's press credentials. Right. What's your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, wow. Well, CNN is doing what it has to do. It has to stand by its correspondent. The White House Correspondents Association, they're standing by him. They push for access. I think that it was the wrong decision for the White House to revoke his hard pass, because it only draws more attention. It seems extreme, and it also makes Acosta a hero to his base, if you will. And it's dangerous, quite frankly. I mean, reporters should be able to go to the White House and cover presidents without fear of reprisal. At the same time, reporters have a responsibility not to make the story about them. And I think what we're seeing is so often reporters are playing the victim with this administration, when this is the most accessible administration, I would say, ever in history. And so I think that we just have to remember the story's not about us. Yep. It's about covering the president. But I think the White House got it wrong this time.
And the Poynter Institute made a great point as well, basically saying, yeah, you know, if he had phrased his question a bit more neutral toward the president, right, it would have done everybody a lot more service.
It was very combative.
Yeah. All right, Jennifer, thank you. Sure. Well, on the heels of the Supreme Court Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, the midterms highlighted a deep partisan divide in the country. But now that the elections are over, how can the country come together and move forward? I recently spoke with Bishop Harry Jackson about the next steps. Well, Bishop Jackson, thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate your time.
Good to be with you.
You know, prayer plays such a huge part in politics and in elections. I know many of you were in a prayer conference called Rise Up. Talk about that and the importance of prayer in this election.
Well, we had many national leaders that gathered together. We prayed for the will of God. One of the big things that came out of that prayer, though, is the need for us to heal the division within the church that is partisan. We kind of hate Democrats, some of us, or we hate Republicans, some of us, and folks refuse to call the president by his name. So we were praying, they just call him 45, so we were praying that God would bring healing to racial division, issues with women, issues with Hispanics and other minorities, class distinctives. And I believe that in the next 2 years, America's future is going to be determined by how well the church can come together.
Such strong opinions on both sides. Where can they find common ground?
Well, I think you're going to find common ground in your sphere of influence, meaning you can talk to your friends, they know your motivation. I believe that's what is the next step. Largely, churches have not discipled their members. So we say, vote your values. That means something different to almost every person. But I believe that we need to engage around our values. We don't need to have party allegiance. We need to have more horizontal discussions where we talk about what people really want.
We actually can see, instead of more division, but true unity.
Yes, Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good. As much as I fasted and prayed all the months before this, I've got to believe that this is not just an outcome, it's God's answer to the prayers of an entire nation. He's not really listening to the unsaved people, he's listening to the church. And this was his best answer. We're playing checkers, he's playing chess, and I think God won.
Well put. Bishop Harry Jackson, thank you so much. It's great to get your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Up next, North Korea's nuclear program. Why some say President Trump was tricked by trusting Kim Jong-un. Welcome back. The U.S. and North Korea have been working to strengthen relations. But could new findings on Kim Jong-un's defense program be a roadblock? Amber Strong has the story.
It's the latest chapter in an ongoing saga between the U.S. and North Korea, with a new report revealing at least 13 hidden missile bases within the country. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, those hidden bases are capable of launching intercontinental ballistic and short-range missiles. Since their Singapore summit, the president has been optimistic about the progress with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un.
The sanctions are on. The missiles have stopped. The rockets have stopped.
That view continued Wednesday when, in a tweet, Mr. Trump called the report of additional bases nothing new. While nuclear and missile testing has stopped, North Korea appears to be full steam ahead in its efforts to build their defenses in other ways. The administration says they're unmoved, saying that sanctions will remain until North Korea is fully denuclearized. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Well, Harry Kazianis is the Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest, and he joins us now. Harry, thanks for being with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Harry, the New York Times has a headline saying the North Korea situation suggests a great deception. President Trump pushing back on that. What do you think? Do you think the president was deceived by Kim Jong-un?
No, actually, I don't think that the president's been deceived at all. In fact, actually, I'm very upset with the New York Times because the headline is basically clickbait. Actually, if you go back to January 1st of this year, Kim Jong-un did a speech that he does every year. And basically, he declared that North Korea would mass produce nuclear warheads and missiles. That's what he's doing. The media keeps jumping on this narrative that that President Trump has been deceived in some way. He actually hasn't been deceived at all. The North Koreans are just doing what they promised to do. Now, we've made a lot of progress with North Korea. They're not testing ICBMs or long-range missiles that can hit the United States. They're not testing nuclear weapons anymore. So those are great things, and those are things that President Trump, I think you have to give him credit for. But the fundamental thing that has created a crisis with North Korea is these long-range missiles, nuclear weapons that they have. And none of that has really changed. But nobody's been deceived.
Yeah, talks set to take place between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and North Korean officials have been postponed, Harry. What's your take on that?
Well, the real problem here is one of sequencing. The challenge is that the North Koreans want all the sanctions lifted, or at least a lot of them, before they start rolling back their nuclear weapons and missile programs. The challenge is the United States wants the exact opposite. They want the North Koreans to start giving up their nuclear weapons, breaking down their nuclear facilities, giving up fissile material, closing down their missile factories. So before they give up any sanctions relief. So the challenge here is one that both sides want the opposite thing. The question is, who goes first? It's very tough for either side to really make that determination because there's political risks for both sides. President Trump is going to look foolish if he makes big concessions and Kim Jong-un doesn't come through. And even though Kim Jong-un's a dictator, he has the same problem. He has supporters back home, and he's going to look foolish if he makes big concessions and Trump doesn't deliver.
A while back, the president tweeted the North Korean nuclear threat was over. A lot of people don't feel that way. Harry, what do you think? Should Americans still be concerned?
I think every single American should be watching the North Korean situation very carefully. The fact is, in the last year, even though the situation with North Korea, at least in the short term, has gotten better, the North Korean nuclear weapons programs and missile programs have gotten a lot more deadly. North Korea has over 1,000 ballistic and cruise missiles in a war that would overwhelm the missile systems that are in Northeast Asia. They have over 65 nuclear weapons, according to the latest intelligence estimates. So even though that we're having summits with North Korea, we're talking with North Korea, their weapons platforms have gotten a lot more deadly. So this is something we have to watch very, very carefully in the months and weeks to come, because it is not over with North Korea, not by a long shot.
And finally, Harry, what comes next for the U.S.-North Korea relationship?
Well, I think there's going to be more talks. And I think the fundamental problem here is who is going to make the first big concession. I think President Trump has actually already made a huge concession by having a summit with Kim Jong-un, meeting him in Singapore, and literally showing him what his country could be transformed into if he's willing to give up his nuclear weapons program. The question is, Kim Jong-un, is he really willing to do that? Is he willing to give up what literally is the ultimate weapon, a weapon that would deter the United States from ever trying to impose regime change, invading them, and maybe even attacking them in the future? So really the bottom line is, who goes first. And if we have a situation where no side is going to go first, these talks will break down, and we could end up going back to the brink of war. We had decided testing nuclear weapons and testing missiles, and that's scary.
All right, Harry Kazianis, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Still ahead, the latest on that migrant caravan making its way to the U.S.-Mexico border. One month ago, a group of Central American migrants began their journey out of Honduras toward the U.S.-Mexico border. Many of those in the so-called caravan plan to seek asylum once they arrive. And as Chuck Holton reports, that's creating a serious crisis for Border Patrol agents awaiting the influx.
In 2017 alone, more than 330,000 migrants made asylum claims, and less than 40% of those were found to have merit. The current system has been unable to keep up with the flood of asylum seekers, which has led to a backlog of more than 800,000 cases, according to the DHS. Now, with several large caravans making their way north to the U.S. border, the Trump administration is deploying more than 7,000 troops to help. Their commander, Northcom General Terrence O'Shaughnessy, recently toured the South Texas border to see the need firsthand.
We've been given a very important task to help harden the ports of entry and try to make sure that our Customs and Border personnel can handle the vast numbers that we're expecting to see in this migration.
Okay, so this is downtown El Paso. We're right on the border fence here. That's Juarez, Mexico, across the Rio Grande there. You can see the river is very shallow right now. You can walk right across it very easily, and many people do. They do that in this area a lot because this fence is what they call the old tortilla curtain. It's so easy to breach in today's environment that it needs to be replaced, and that's actually exactly what they're doing. If you look over here to my right, you can see some construction going on. That's them in the process of installing new and much more substantial fence, but that's not part of Trump's border wall. The reason that they're putting this in now is because this area has become really, really busy with migrants crossing illegally, and when they do that, it's extremely expensive for the American taxpayer.
I mean, we're starting to see diseases that we hadn't seen in decades here. Smallpox, chickenpox, all of that. You add that to the cost of the removal proceedings. You add that to the dangers that we as a community face, and people don't realize that.
The Trump administration recently announced a new measure to discourage illegal border crossers. Anyone caught entering the country illegally will not be eligible for asylum. It's a controversial move, but it doesn't mean the migrants will be turned away. The military on the border is working long hours to help the Border Patrol prepare to handle thousands of legal asylum seekers.
Specifically, they're initially looking for that engineering capability that will allow us to harden the points of entry and make sure that we are able to provide barricades, provide an ability for them to be able to process large numbers of migrants that will come in.
The men and women of the Border Patrol are very glad for the help, but they say in the long run, what they really need is a wall.
If you just look, I mean, to cut through this is going to take a lot more than it is to cut through with just, I mean, I could use my Leatherman, I could take it out, and I could cut through that. This, I mean, it's been repaired all the way through. It's just section after section like this, where it's been cut.
By entering the United States at a place not designated as a port of entry, you are committing a crime. And we need to make sure that in the metropolitan areas we have the best barrier we can have to give us the right amount of time so that we can prevent, persuade people not to come across, and if not, then we can make a safe apprehension. It buys us time.
In the meantime, with more than 1,000 migrants a day attempting to cross the Rio Grande, the Border Patrol will take all the help they can get, and the U.S. military is answering the call. From El Paso, Texas, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
And that is going to do it for us this evening with Faith Nation. We'll see you right back here again tomorrow. Have a great evening.